Thank you for being here. Subject today, as you've noticed, building a sustainable music industry. And in particular, we're going to try and do that in relation to the country we're now in, to Luxembourg. See what's happening with that. And what, as opposed to not doing it anywhere else.
We have a great soundtrack.
Yeah, can we do anything about the soundtrack?
I guess not. It's okay.
No, okay. Well, we just have to live with it.
Yeah, we just speak loud.
Okay. All right. We're going to try and look at the many ways in which the music industry's changed, mainly due to technology. How do our audiences reach their artists and vice versa? And how do aspiring artists and ambitious music companies access the revenues that are required to develop their ambitions? With the help of our panelists, our beautiful panelists, who cover both areas of many things, two ladies who actually are involved with where we may be able to lay hands on some money, and another two people who've actually had lots of experience in management in various areas of the business. And between them, we'll try and find out how things are going, how things are changing. So before we actually get into that, as usual here, I'd like to find out who's in the room. So have we got any musicians, any artists in the room? Oh, phew, that's better with those lights, actually. Record companies? Oh, a couple. Publishers? Record company and publisher. All right, okay. That's very good. Anybody else? Students? All right. We usually get we always get quite a lot of those, actually. So, right, so basically we've got some people involved with the music industry, which is a pretty good thing to do. Right, so now I would like to ask my guests to introduce themselves to you before we launch into this. So, on my right.
Sure, okay, so I'm Helen Smith. I run Impala, which is an organisation based in Brussels, and it groups together national associations and independent music companies across Europe. So we really cover the independent music sector, which goes from labels, publishers, distributors, through to self-released artists. And we estimate that we represent about 80% of all new releases across Europe today.
Yeah, hi, I'm Frank. I work for Creative Europe, which is the European funding and support program for the creative industries and the cultural sector. This program supports the whole sector, so from theater to dance, and from musea to music. Within this program, there's been some new. The start of a new support program is called Music Moves Europe, which is specifically targeted towards the music industry. And I'm going to shine some light on that in this panel. And
even more light.
Even more light. And I have a background in the industry as a manager and a booking agent.
Right. I'm Alan McGowan, and you don't need to know who I am, apart from the fact I'm sitting up here and supposedly moderating this panel. Anyway.
Hi, I'm Max. I am a musician, co-founder of Unison Studios. We are a production and record studio, recording studio, and I'm the co-founder of the Sirens Call Festival, which is a music and culture festival here in Luxembourg.
Hello, I'm AMADORI. I work at the European Investment Fund, and I'm the head of the Competence Center for Culture and Education. I take care of managing and implementing a number of guarantee facilities that are handed to EIF to manage from the European Union, so the European Commission. And among the various guarantee facilities, I also manage, together with my team, of course, the culture and creative sectors guarantee facility. And this is why I'm here today.
Right. Okay, as we're talking particularly about Luxembourg and the way things may change and what might develop, I'm going to turn to Max to give us an idea on the state of things at the moment. What is the state of things in Luxembourg?
Well, thank you for that easy question, Alan. The state in Luxembourg is that there's been a huge evolution over the last 15, 20 years in the music sector and industries as well. We come a long way because Luxembourg used to be and is still a super tiny country with not that big of a cultural music scene, but that really got developed over the last 15, 20 years, and now reached a point where we have more and more artists. We have professionals in every sector of the music and arts industry. So there's managers out there, there's people organizing concerts, festivals, events. But there's tons of artists and a lot of really great emerging artists. So it's at a point where there's still a long way, there's still a lot of stuff to do. But regarding or looking back over the last decades, we've come a long way and a good way.
You're sure things are going to get better?
I'm super optimistic in life and for the music industry.
That's the word I wanted to introduce. Optimistic. Okay, well, we're sticking on the side of people working, directly at the coalface of the music industry. This whole idea now, the way things are changing, and the way there does seem to be funding access, whatever, coming in. Do you think things are changing for the better? How has the business progressed, as far as you can see, in the last few months?
Me or?
That's you.
Yeah, okay.
Tim, we're going to come to people who get hold of money afterwards.
Okay. From a funding perspective, you asked, right?
That's one of the things, because you tend to cross over.
I tend to cross over indeed. Well, what's interesting, since about 2 years, if I talk about the European funding dimension, since about 2 years, this Music Moves Europe program or initiative, I have to say, is there, and there's been a lot of studies and a lot of pilot funding programs and schemes available. And what you see is now that there is a dedicated funding program for the music industry, the industry gets recognized more, also in other domains. And it's sort of almost an emancipation of the sector itself. And I think the goal also is, in the long-term goal of Music Moves Europe, is to establish a program which is on a European level, so just as important as the media program of Creative Europe, which is a big program for the whole media sector. And if you look at, for example, cinemas in Europe, they are like structurally funded, and it really improves and encourages the circulation of European cinema. And I think we're taking the first baby steps here as the music sector, but we're taking them and we're getting recognized. And I talk to all sorts of people nowadays out of other domains like the economy or the social domain about music, and it is because there is a specific program. So yeah, that's good.
And have we learned to lobby? Have we learned to deal with government?
Well, we learned it a little bit, and we're getting there. We're getting better at it. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Before we move on, we've only got 45 minutes here, and we haven't got 45 minutes anymore. So if anybody's got any questions to ask, we're not going to wait right until the end. Throw in a question when you think it's relevant. So I want to ask you, has anybody actually applied for any particular funding from Music Enterprise in the last year? No? Right. Oh, someone in the front row. Can you tell us what it was and how you got on?
It's great to see an INES panel, because just behind you there's the INES logo.
I didn't give you an opportunity to plug.
That is one of the fundings we applied for, and we got through the Creative Europe program. But we also, as a company, so I run GigMit, which is a Berlin-based, more like digital company for music booking. And in that sense, we applied to the Music Moves Europe call for online-offline distribution to pilot test new things and get new ideas in the digital space as well. and we got a project called Laser where we analyze data, streaming data and social media data from artists and use them kind of for live music and for better touring in Europe.
Right, so what's your next move on that?
Launching the platform actually by the end of this year, and we're going to present it probably at Eurosonic and the results about it.
Right, so far the words optimism and success.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's
pretty good.
Anybody else in the room that's gone for any funding or whatever of late? Right, good. Well, at least I'm glad we had one. Now we're going to turn to you, and let's talk about areas where people can apply for funding or have help in developing their businesses. So tell me what you've been doing.
Sure. So Impala adopted an action plan for finance a few years ago, and there were a number of recommendations in there specifically for members, and that included at European level and also national level. And one of them was, a dedicated program for music, and that we can see with Music Moves Europe. And the other one was a loan guarantee scheme. And that's something that CHIARA is going to talk about as well. And yesterday we just came back from a board meeting in Paris, and there the French independent organisation was telling us all about how a tax credit works in France. And it's really amazing because they were able to persuade the government that for every euro they put in for a tax credit, they would get 3 back somehow, but through employment or VAT, etc., the kind of added value that kind of investment would make. So they tried to turn it around and say that when government intervenes in that way, it's not like a subsidy, it's an investment which will generate cash for the government. So of course France is way ahead of other countries when it comes to how to work with the cultural sectors, and they have, I think we heard something like, I don't know if I got the figure exactly correct, but it's like something like 60 million they are investing in a centre for music, and they're inspired by what they've done with the French Centre for Cinema. So this is like the national music sector from start to finish is affiliated around a centre for music, and with a funding of about 60 million. It's incredible. So you can imagine if you were to multiply those kind of activities in every single member state, then the music sector would be really strong. And one of the rationales, I think, for European intervention is also it's about promoting European music and its diversity. And if you look at like grassroots operators like we have at Impala, a lot of them, they want to use these instruments, but it's actually quite hard to do so because the amounts of money that they typically need for a project are fairly low. So they're really typically looking at national loans for relatively small amounts. But what I think we're also interested in is finance that will facilitate growth, because independent music companies typically have, they work locally, they have, very small market share compared with the majors, and it can be hard to compete and grow internationally. So that's an area which we think still requires more investment, and it's something that we're looking at specifically. But like has already been mentioned, the fact that the digital market is opening up new opportunities makes our members, super optimistic as well. They're, light-footed and in control of their destiny, and what they want to do is work with their artists so that they create more opportunities. And the finance really should be there in the background, not something that becomes like the main focus, but it's something which is natural and exists from the bottom up in every single country.
So if somebody from Luxembourg was to make an approach to you with an idea, how would they go about things?
Well, I think Music Moves Europe could be interesting for an operator in Luxembourg, or what if Luxembourg has other initiatives that are national. I think one of the issues that our members find is that that they operate in a global market. or in Europe, but the finance sector is still intrinsically national. We have seen this over the past few years. We're trying to develop this like European fund, an investment fund or a loan fund, and every time we get so far, because we end up realizing that the finance sector is so rigid and so national that we see it as a break. It's one of the reasons why the loan guarantee scheme was set up, because they could see that the finance sector was really in a kind of like market failure type of situation. So, maybe CHIARA can tell us how that's going to solve everything.
I loved your timing on that. Yes, tell us about things, and you're going to show us some pictures as well, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, actually, I've prepared some slides. I don't know if someone can put them up. Great, thanks. So I'm not sure that we have solved the market failure yet, but we have come a long way since the start. So this instrument, it's a dedicated guarantee facility. It is the first one for the culture and creative sector. It was launched in 2016, and it was a pilot instrument. So not a lot of money, according to the EU standards, was set dedicated for this instrument. But after, let's say, 1 year into the making and into the implementation, the interest was so high that we got an additional funding from what is called, or what is normally known as the Juncker Plan. So now the total funding is actually 251 million euros. And when we talk about 251 million euros, you will see afterwards what we provide is guarantees. So we have quite a large leverage effect. So in reality, the amount of funding that is given to the industry, so to the sectors, is actually much higher. On top of this, it is actually the first financial instrument created with an additional capacity building element added into it. And this was exactly because of what Helen was saying. It was noticed that there was a clear, let's say, market failure. Maybe it's a bit of a very negative connotation, but it is a bit to say that the culture and creative sectors are disregarded and in a way underestimated by the financial sector, and they are looked at in a certain skeptical light whenever it comes to financing. And for that reason, the capacity building element was embedded into the pilot to ensure that there would be some kind of like guiding the various financial intermediaries that would sign up to the scheme into learning more about the culture and creative sectors, and learning how to evaluate how they operate, evaluate their assets to make sure that more funding would be made available to the sector. That was the idea. How do we work under this facility? This is how any guarantee facility works whenever it is set up at an EU level. So it's the European Commission together with the various implementing partners that defines, let's say, the overarching principles and the functioning of this facility. In this case, the implementation is delegated to the European Investment Fund. We select the various financial intermediaries across the various European countries that are eligible. And this is finally to the benefit of the various entrepreneurs that are located in the various countries that will apply for a funding that will ultimately be guaranteed by the European Investment Fund thanks to the funding provided by the European Union. I'm not going to repeat this, but this is actually just to explain that, as I mentioned before, you have on the one side the guarantee on the financing that is provided, and on the other side we assist the banks into evaluating better this type of financing request and making sure that more financing is ultimately given to the sector. We do not forget, however, through the capacity building, the support that is supposed to be given finally to the final beneficiaries that will want to access this financing. So we have, for the moment, created, or at least designed, an e-guide that is available on our website, where the various entrepreneurs, so this is of course not only for the music sector, it's for all culture and creative sectors, but the idea is to explain what type of funding and financing is available, including grants. We also talk about grants, and we guide each entrepreneur to understanding at which stage of development they are, and according to the stage of development, which type of financing/funding would make more sense according to where they want to go and what they need at that point in time. This guide is available on our website, and at the same time, we also organize and participate to a number of events, including, for example, today, making sure that the knowledge of the guarantee facility is spread, so that actually entrepreneurs are able to access, for example, the list of financial intermediaries that are already cooperating with us under the scheme, or they talk to their own banks to make sure that the banks look into the scheme and maybe think about setting up a cooperation with us, because this is how the availability of such scheme grows. Where we stand today, so we have signed 13 agreements across 10 participating countries. As I said, we started the implementation end of 2016, so this is only after 3 years of implementation. We have committed, out of the 251 million euros budget that I mentioned, we have committed 115 million euros, and this should leverage more than 1.16 billion of financing across the entire CCS sector, yeah? We cover already 15 countries through some agreements that are quite beneficial. We have a specific agreement in France that it's for the audiovisual industry, and in that case we can cover also other countries because they can provide their guarantee outside of France. And we have received more expression of interest, and more are coming in as we speak, and we hope to be expanding our geographical coverage even more over the next year and a half that is left. And then I wanted to kind of just show you where we are in terms of only the music industry. This is, let's say, I would say after really a year of financing, a year and a half, we have now supported 6.4 million euros of over 26 projects, and this is actually in reality supporting a total investment volume of 15.4 million euros, because we have quite a big leverage effect also in terms of financing versus the final project cost. And this is across 6 countries, as you can see, and as you were mentioning before, France is actually quite advanced, and yes, it is also shown here. As you can see, France is one of the countries that receives, for the moment, most financing, and it's also because the sector, unfortunately, we're trying to, of course, build, through the capacity building, more knowledge and so on across the various countries, but France was indeed more advanced already, and this is why you see that for the moment they have the most of loans covered under the music, let's say, sphere of the facility. And this is, once again, as I said, this is only the start. This program will continue under the new 7 years programming period of the European Commission. It will be even enlarged. We are considering also having an equity arm attached to it, so we would also do equity investments probably towards the culture and creative sectors. And it will be within the bigger scope of what is called the new programming period main financial instrument, that it will be called Invest EU. So a lot is happening, and a lot will come still. Thank you. I'm done, Alan.
Problem solved.
I was going to say there was no UK flag up there, but I wasn't going to mention Brexit. I got told.
Yeah, don't mention the B word.
I think you were told not to say that word.
I was told not to say that word. But yeah. So, is this like going to your bank? This is like deciding you want to make your, you want to develop your business, and you go and knock on the door of the bank. Or
yes, you need to knock on the door on the bank that has signed up. So as I was showing the map with the various countries and so on our website there is available the list of banks that we are cooperating with. And depending on each country, I do not know where all our audience is from, but depending on certain countries, this is available. Unfortunately, not in Luxembourg, I must say.
Yet.
Yet.
Yes.
They could come round and knock on your door directly.
We don't have any banks in Luxembourg, apparently.
That's new.
Chiara, can I ask you something? I
Yes,
was wondering, you were saying that the music industry was like, how much? 5 million?
6.4, yeah.
Can you maybe give some examples of what kind of organizations or knock on the door of these banks for support, and what kind of support do you give them? Because I'm really curious what this means in the industry, like on the work floor.
Look, I have to say that I would need to check at each of those files and see what type of financing was given, and I have to say that unfortunately I didn't do it, so I apologize for this. In general, what I can say is that it's clearly small loans. Yes, it's not very big amounts, but for the music sector, I don't think it would make sense to have very big amounts, depending on what was needed. I think I mentioned that it was mostly for music publishing. This was mentioned in the slide. And but of course, I mean, it will depend on each company, where they are in the value chain of the music industry, what they do, and so on and so forth. And each one of them will have different financing needs. Then finally, the decision on whether to give out the loan will still rest with the bank. What we do is we provide a guarantee. The guarantee is a 70% guarantee, so 7-0. And we support the banks into understanding how to evaluate the various loan requests, and also to make sure that they evaluate correctly the collateral that can be provided, including the rights attached and so on and so forth, to make sure that they do not require any personal collateral on top of the collateral that can be offered by the entrepreneur itself and by their activity, which already for the industry itself, for the sector itself, is already a big step forward.
So when you're talking about evaluating what goes through the bank, is there, I mean, how much is devoted to assessing the value of the product that comes out of it? It's like being an A&R man at a record company. How is that chosen? Is the whole thing chosen on the basis of security of finance, or how much of it is to do with something that's going to actually benefit the music industry one way or another?
We're trying to work on that. This is what we try to teach banks how to do. A bank right now would mainly look at how are they going to pay back my loan, and they wouldn't be able to evaluate the final product itself and what that final product may bring and may be financially sustainable on its own, if you want, and have the relevant revenues to repay the loan and so on. Right now, what they would do indeed is mainly to make sure that the loan is more than 100% collateralized. And we are trying to teach them that the way they look at the collateral, maybe it's for the moment a bit restrictive, and they should learn how to assess.
In other areas like film and photography and fashion and whatever, do you do? You know?
Each subsector is different. Each subsector has its own different collateral / rights / guarantees to be considered, and each subsector will be looked at in a different way. This is what we do through the capacity building. We actually look at each subsector, and we teach the banks to look at each subsector in its own merit and in its own specificities. This is what we try to do, at least.
Right, but if you're going to talk to people through Impala about going to try and get a financial deal like this, is it something you'd feel that Impala would encourage, or it would appear to me you'd have more of an A&R facility to look at?
Well, I think a lot of our members are really interested. I don't know any of our members who have actually managed to benefit from this scheme yet, but it's still being rolled out. In some countries, the partners have only just been signed up. In Sweden, I think there was a partner signed up just in the last few weeks, and you know, that's taken a long time, because you would imagine that a country like Sweden that has, you know, a really successful music sector and massive export would be like really keen in supporting all these initiatives. But it took quite a long time, surprisingly, to get a bank, even in a country like that, ready. So we would hope that our members will be involved in being able to get their projects financed and benefit from this loan scheme really quickly.
I just wanted to maybe point out, we're always talking about funding and giving back money and whatnot, but we need to see music also and the music industries as a cultural good. And I think it's really important also to speak about, not how can we pay that back? What does music bring to our everyday life? What does creativity bring? Is there not also points where there needs to be, just as for the film, like public funding that is beneficiating artists directly and not maybe companies as per se? The industry is artists, the industry is managers, the industry is a lot of different things. That's events. So maybe, one sector, that's okay, but maybe also let's push it and to see music more as a cultural gift, as something that we all need and maybe doesn't need to be paid back 100% in the area of the internet where music doesn't make any money.
Yeah, you beat me to
You're
it.
speaking like a true Frenchman.
Well, maybe there's a little bit of Frenchman inside of me.
No, I actually really agree with you because this bank scheme is obviously very much focused on entrepreneurs, and not everybody is an entrepreneur to begin with, but pretty much everybody who makes music needs money. And I think I see it a lot as a part of a big spectrum of different funding opportunities. And the last thing I think, and I speak now maybe a bit as an artist manager, an artist needs to do is go to the bank and get a massive loan, which is like a stone around his neck, because we'll never be able to pay it back, collateral or not. And that's where we need art funding for, because indeed music is also and serves a public good. And I think what I do think is really interesting is look at music in different ways. Not only look at it as an art for the public good, but also look at it from the social domain, for example. It serves also sort of like social cohesion. And maybe we should start talking to those kind of financiers more, like, hey, we are here in industry which brings people together. That's worth something. And maybe from the economic perspective, we can look indeed into more the entrepreneurial side of things and go into loans. But I think it's really important that we understand who we are first, and that there's so much different stakeholders within our sector who all need different funding, have different funding needs and different ways of paying back, if any. So.
I mean, to create, what does an artist need? It needs a space. So let's make sure we have some spaces where people don't pay, again, big loans or have like a monthly rent that is just going to crush them. Just places like small studios, production spaces, art spaces, and also spaces where people can come together, because I think it's in the multidisciplinary fact when musicians meet directors, when they meet artists, and when they meet managers, when they meet other people. So it's also looking maybe at how can we create offline spaces? Online, everything is good, but everybody knows about how to distribute music nowadays. But how can we recreate spaces where actually people exchange and create before even thinking about how we can make money out of it? I mean, events, where artists can show their art, that is really important. And I think we need to think more in that direction.
Although, I mean, this panel is all about developing the music sector in a particular place, in Luxembourg, somewhere or another. So would you, I mean, if there were enough people that got together and actually said we need some overall funding, which might be well provided from this sector, but still had your moral attitude as well within that, which I agree with, obviously, whatever, is that something that you protest?
No, well, I think there's always going to be, and there was always a need for people that are going to take the initiative and going to say, hey, I'm going to be in charge of getting the funding to fund a place or a project, and then be involved with the artists. I mean, some people need to take that on their minds, and some people really love to do that. And it's already happening, and I think it's happening everywhere in Europe. But we need to see it more on a smaller level, and then build it out. Because what is the music industry today? Are we talking about major labels? Are we talking about big companies, Spotify and whatnot? Yes, on one side, But for me, the music industry is like every single one in here that tries to do a living, working in arts, in different art forms, and helping each other out. So that is also an industry, although it's not $1 billion industry as per se the big ones.
Well, it's social capital, and that's just as important as financial capital.
And we prefer to call it a sector, not an industry, because as soon as you say industry, you're immediately projecting a certain type of image, which doesn't really correspond to what the music sector looks like.
Is there anybody in the room here that actually put their hand up when they said they were working in the music business? Do any of you feel that you would like to walk over and knock on the door of a bank now to try and build your business? Yeah. Yes.
But he's more an entrepreneur.
Yeah, but have you done that before?
Actually, it's funny because within the INES project, we have a partner in Spain. I mean, we are based in Germany. Unfortunately, there's no bank in Germany that works in this scheme. But we have a Spanish partner, and the Spanish partner actually used the guarantee and got the European funding from Creative Europe and built a festival that helps artists to get on stage and like network with other people. So that is where it all comes together, and it was really interesting following your discussion about it, because I felt like, okay, it's actually already working. It's still small and should grow and should kind of go to more and more countries, but the festival is kind of able to get a loan and use that money in order to give artists the space, and then the artist doesn't need to think about paying back any sort of
it's very complementary that way, because maybe I didn't want to be negative about it, because I think it's a really important instrument and I'm really excited, but it should be targeted to the right people and to the right organizations. And sometimes I have the idea that there are some discrepancies there.
We are part of the same program. So I guess someone has designed the program exactly to have complementary actions. So I do not think that it's targeted to the wrong audience. It's just that maybe sometimes someone thinks he should be the right target, but maybe he's not. And I think it's mostly, this is why the guide, to make sure that you know where you are and who you are, and that you know what to choose. This is also going towards that direction.
Is this something that could actually get itself involved with Music Moves Europe?
Well, yeah, I've been talking a lot to the Dutch music sector specifically, and also to the more European music sector. And what I noticed over the last year and a half, since I've been really actively involved in Music Moves Europe, but also in Creative Europe, is that there is sometimes a misunderstanding of what Europe actually means with certain words or certain expressions or certain support.
One of them begin with B.
Huh?
Just one of them begin with B.
It's.
I'm Scottish, so we can continue that for a long time.
No, but I think there's a responsibility on both sides of the fence here to start learning each other's language more, and that way. We can hopefully connect these support programs better to the sector, but it's really a language thing as well.
We're getting quite close to the end here, actually, but I think as we need to get back to this area of how we could possibly help and develop the Luxembourg music sector in one way or another. Are there any other areas to approach, finance approaches and whatever that come to mind? I mean, are the publishers doing enough? Are the publishers doing enough?
I mean, Luxembourg is, of course, a very problematic place because it's super tiny. There is no market. So anyway, the market is Europe or is the world. Publishers also work worldwide. It's not like locally based. I think what's important for Luxembourg is to continue to do things like this, to have events where people get together, where people get to meet each other, where people get to exchange. As I said, also create like physical places. Of course, initiatives and funding initiatives where people that see themselves more as an entrepreneur get the needs to develop something for the creative scene, for the art scene. There's a lot of things to do. Again, I'm staying optimistic, and I am already right now optimistic.
That's why I planned it.
And Yeah, and also just coming back to the European program, I think it's a wonderful idea, and also we've been discussing that a little bit before. It's just to make it more understandable for the artists themselves, and that's where the work needs to be done, and maybe also not think in millions or in 100,000s, but how can, as simply as that, how can an artist today get 10,000 euros to make a record and to have some money to push that on the internet, and maybe have some money left to buy some gear to do live shows. You know, maybe not see it in the bigger dimension, but maybe from a Luxembourgish point of view also, make it smaller, make it more accessible.
Yeah, we are good. Olivier, did you actually have something you wanted to add? Well, I mean, consider. Let me put it this way. I know the work you put into obviously developing the Rock Hall and live venues, and live music is very close to my heart and whatever. So, in terms of developing things around here, how much more do you think should we put into live?
You should come to this room at around 6. We're going to talk a little bit about live. I'd like to join Max in what he said. We're a very small country, so we need to look for opportunities inside the country. But very soon we're going to hit the borders, so we need to pass them and then find any sort of collaborations and luck, ideally in other territories. We've been, and you know that, we've been very active as the Rock Hall in different collaboration projects, and we've always been very strongly after trying to create opportunities. I believe personally that it's not going to be me or anyone in my team that can take the opportunity for the artist or for the creator, but what we can do is we leverage the reputation that we have, the network that we have, and put in place, places like this. Thank you, Max, and other collaborations that people will just say, okay, I want to do this, and I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to seize the opportunity, and then, who knows? And we got to meet. I got to meet CHIARA in Brussels earlier this year, where we were discussing a very similar topic. And I was very intrigued by this guarantee facility and hearing that this does not exist in Luxembourg. So, and there was one guy sitting on the panel, and actually he reminded me of what you're doing, looking at Max again. He told us about his case study, and he had put on a loan to buy for his studio a recording desk, because it's meant adding value to his studio, to the reputation. It was a big, proper SSL desk, as it should be, and it created business for them. And so they were very happy, and I saw that they are second country to use the facility. So I felt this was interesting. But then again, I agree it needs to be a whole lot of combination of different tools. It's a lot of different financial tools. There's going to be some public money, there's going to be some startup money, there's at some point going to be some more business reflections and all of that good stuff. And then it's all about opportunities to showcase your talent, showcase what you can do, get to know the right people. And then I'm a lot about collaborative spaces, because that's where the magic happens. And so this is again why we do this event, because a lot of stuff seems to happen here.
And at the basis of it all, great music,
Yeah.
great music
Yeah, exactly.
production, good recordings, good mixing, good mastering.
I was assuming that talent was already present, but you're right to mention that, of course.
Yeah.
Right, on that optimistic point of view, which I was glad to hear, I shall be standing at the door with wads of cash to hand out. we leave. But anybody else got anything they want to add just before we finish?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, to think about where we are now on the finance side compared with, 5-10 years ago, it's phenomenal. And, we should be really proud to be European, and maybe, Brexit separate debate. And the fact that, we can say, we point to this guarantee scheme, we point to the fact that the Commission has this dedicated music programme. We need to be really talking about this in a really positive way, because that's how we encourage national initiatives as well. And I also wanted to just add that, from the music sector's perspective, really, it's also about making sure that we have a level playing field and these spaces exist. And of course, public finance is really, really important there. But it's also about, understanding that all artists are born equal, and there are so many elements in the chain, and it's really, we have a collective responsibility to make sure that that means something in the real world. And when we talk about a sustainable music sector, we're talking, the focus is on finance today, and that's really interesting because, we're in one of the capitals of finance in Europe. But, we also, need to look at other questions around sustainability, inclusiveness, and environmental responsibility, social responsibility of actors in the music sector. And that's, a very broad issue. Maybe there's another panel on that to be had next year. But, the question of sustainability is of course finance, but it's also, much, much broader.
Right. Join us for episode 2 fairly soon. Well, thank you all very much for being here, and thank you very much to the panel. I think we've learned something from it. We'll talk about it later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.